BuzzFeed has this great article. It's called How Millennials Became the Burnout Generation. And this woman, she writes, I couldn't figure out why small, straightforward tasks on my to-do list felt so impossible. The answer is both more complex and far simpler than I expected. Allow me to just give you my opinion right off the bat. It's because millennials are stunted. They're not becoming adults. They go on Twitter and they insult people like children, and they don't know how to mail letters. I'm not exaggerating. That's basically the opening premise of this article. They even point to a tweet from Matt Fuller who said, so this is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a bunch of millennials who don't know how to mail things. I kid you not. This story he's commenting on, 12 young people and why they probably won't vote, because they don't know how to mail in their voter registration. Seriously. I was on Twitter, okay? And I did a story like a week ago maybe about, it was called Debunking the Narrative. Okay, I got research from this software engineer showing that YouTube is not a path to radicalization. In fact, it's more likely that if you are right-wing, you will flow into left-wing content, okay? There are algorithmic bubbles. Journalists don't seem to understand this, but anyway, I posted this. In response, some left-wing journalists replied with Pim Tool. I don't understand what that means, or if it's supposed to be an insult. But if it is, and I'm assuming it is, Pim Tool, inverting the first letters of my names, it's not an insult. It means nothing. And it's something a child would do. Haha, you're Tim. Like, it was, I believe, the last time someone tried using, like, a name pun insult. I was in 3rd grade, and this kid named Gerardo called me Tim Fool. Okay, they called my name on the PA, and they're like, Tim Fool, please come to the office. And he goes, more like Tim Fool. And I was like, what? I don't understand. I don't understand what you're trying to do. Like, if you wanted to insult me, right? If you wanted to insult me, you could say something like, I don't know, make fun of some of my ideas, try to belittle concepts that I believe in, and genuinely say, this is why you are stupid, or a tool, it's this. But literally just doing it, it's like what children do. And I responded, I'm like, it's actually really fascinating to see how millennials are kind of stunted. Like, they haven't become adults. They're not having families. They're not having kids. Admittedly, I'm in that boat. I don't have a family. I'm not married or anything. I'm 32, okay? So yeah, there's something happening with millennials where they're not becoming adults. Here we have a story from BuzzFeed. Anne Helen Peterson, the woman who writes it, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but she calls it the Burnout Generation. And she's talking about how straightforward tasks are impossible. Mailing something isn't hard. But here's the thing, okay? She's not talking about, for the most part, she's not talking about that they're just so overwhelmed with work that life has become such a struggle. They have no time to mail things. She's literally talking about just procrastinating. She talks about this guy, Tim, okay? And outlining the reasons why he, like 11 other millennials, wouldn't vote. He said the amount of work logically isn't that much. Fill out a form, mail it in, go to the specific place on a specific day, but those kind of tasks can be hard for me to do if I'm not enthusiastic about it. Quite literally. They go online, they complain all day and night about politics, and then when it comes to actually doing something about it, what do? They sit back, kick their feet up, and say, yeah, but it's so much, well, it's not really work, but I just don't care. It's a combination of nihilism, laziness, getting you a kind of procrastination. She says in the article, Tim goes on to admit that some friends have helped him register to vote. You need someone to, come on. And he planned to probably make it happen for the midterms. But his explanation, even though, as he noted, his struggle in this case was caused in part by his ADHD, triggered the contemporary tendency to dunk on millennials' inability to complete seemingly basic tasks. Grow up. The overall sentiment goes, life is not that hard. So this is the way the world ends. And they reference Matt Fuller. Explanations like Tim's are at the core of the millennial reputation. We're spoiled, entitled, lazy, and failures at what's to be known as adulting, a word invented by millennials as a catch-all for the tasks of self-sufficient existence. Expressions of adulting do often come as privileged astonishment at the realities of, well, life. That you have to pay bills and go to work. That you have to buy food and cook if you want to eat it. That actions have consequences. Adulting is hard because life is hard. Or as a Bustle article admonishes its readers, everything is hard if you want to look at it that way. I've always had the other kind of approach. I've always viewed things as relatively easy. And I think the reason is your frame of reference. People like this, okay? Middle class to upper middle class, progressive, privileged, all that good stuff. I love how it's them. I love how it's the progressives who talk about how privileged everyone is. But it kind of makes sense when you realize they lived a life of privilege, therefore they, as racists, believe white people must have all lived the same way they did. They see a white person and they say, I grew up this special way, you must have too. Not realizing most poor people in the country are actually white. What ends up happening? Well, for me, why do I think everything is easy? Because when I was younger, I went through some really hard shit. No, I just swore. Yeah, there were gangs on the south side of Chicago. Some of my friends died of heroin overdoses. I've been homeless on a couple occasions. You want to know what hard is? Hard is trying to figure out how you're going to pull yourself out of homelessness. When you're sleeping in your car, you can't make your car payments and once get repossessed. I'm like, man, this is hard. But you know what the thing is? When you experience that kind of hardship, you realize you don't got to stress that much because even that isn't really that hard. You know, it's tough, but you get used to it. And you think, okay, this isn't so bad. It is bad relative to everything else, but when you're in it, you can survive. And when you've survived true hardship, you think, wow, registering to vote? That's ridiculously easy. Being an adult, not that hard. Everything just feels hard for some reason because I think most of these young people, they have what's called bulldozer parents who have plowed all of the obstacles out from in front of them. So these kids grow up with nothing in their path and they don't develop strength. Therefore, when they're older, they're sitting back going, oh my God, Donald Trump's president, what do I do? I could vote, but God damn it, I am just not enthusiastic about actually mailing in that voter registration. I know, I'll complain on Twitter. Welcome to the world of the millennial adults. They don't, maybe this is a good thing, right? They don't do anything, they're overly sensitive, and it's not all millennials, of course it's not. There's just a special class of these snowflakey types. They sit around complaining on the internet. When someone like me publishes research saying there's no path to radicalization, they go, Pim Tool. And I'm like, what? Okay, in this regard, I'll give more credit to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she's outspoken and she ran for office and won. That's the opposite of what these people are doing. Now, don't get me wrong, I think a lot of her policies are kind of, I agree with some of her policies. You know, I think we've got we need campaign finance reform, big problem. I think we have a problem with private prisons. I don't know what the answer is necessarily, but a profit motive for locking people up doesn't necessarily work. So look, Cortez should be criticized for her gaffes, but listen, I don't want to get into the Cortez thing again. What I want to point out is she actually got up and did something. It's not an easy thing to do, running for office, and she won. Granted, she won through an exploit by primarying a Democrat, but look, strategy is strategy, victory is victory. She did something. Think about what she's doing. The youngest congresswoman, to enter, whether you like her or not, it's not the point, is that, you know what, man? If I had to choose between millennial friends, and I had a choice between Cortez and someone who's laying around and won't even mail a letter to save their own political ideology, I'd rather be friends with the doer, okay? Cortez might be a gaffe queen, but I gotta respect that she's getting up and doing something, you know what I mean? These millennials, they play this, and look, the other thing too is, Cortez definitely plays the stupid name game on Twitter. So it's a thing for millennials to not actually argue points. No, actually, I'll take that back, because Cortez does argue points. She just argues them wrong often. But anyway, she goes on to say, millennials love to complain about other millennials giving them a bad name. Case in point. But as I fumed about this 27-year-old's post office anxiety, I was deep in a cycle of a tendency developed over the last 5 years that I've come to call errand paralysis. I'd put something on my weekly to-do list, and it'd roll over 1 week to the next, haunting me for months. None of these tasks were that hard. Getting knives sharpened, taking boots to the cobbler, registering my dog for a new license, sending someone a signed copy of my book, scheduling an appointment with the dermatologist, donating books to the library, vacuuming my car, a handful of emails, one from a dear friend, one from a former student, asking how my life was going. Faster to my personal inbox, which I use as a sort of alternative to-do list, to the point that I started calling it the inbox of shame. It's not as if I were slacking in the rest of my life. I was publishing stories, writing 2 books, making meals, executing a move across the country, planning trips, paying my student loans, exercising on a regular basis. But when it came to the mundane, the medium priority, the stuff that wouldn't make my job easier or my work better, I avoided it. Okay, let me address what that is. This is, in my opinion, a kind of entitlement, right? Why is it that it's easy, and I don't want to necessarily, I don't know anything about this woman's life, but let's just say this. When it comes to things like writing stories, making YouTube videos, writing books, that's you saying, I want the best. Not realizing that life comes with tedium, and it comes with maintenance. And I think maybe this is one of the most important lessons that millennials haven't learned. You gotta mow the lawn. You gotta take the trash out. You gotta brush your teeth. You got to change your contacts. You got to take care of your hygiene. You have to take the trash out. You got to file paperwork. You have bills. It's tedium. It exists. It's called routine maintenance. But what do millennials want? They want to grab the trophy at the top of the mountain. And they don't want to do the little tiny things you have to do in between to make sure everything's working on time. What ends up happening? Well, the things get neglected, young people don't vote, then they go on Twitter and complain about it, and I sit back saying, what happened to millennials that made them such lazy and entitled mean people, I guess? Why can't they engage, for the most part, with normal conversation? Why is it always some freaky conversation about banning people? Oh, that person said a mean thing, ban them. Instead of actually going and registering to vote and voting for who they care about. What happens when Trump wins? Heavens, he must be impeached. No, you lost because you wouldn't get off your ass and go register to vote because you're lazy. My stars and garters. Well, let's just see how she concludes, because she talked about the Burnout Generation, and I think that's calling millennials a burnout is kind of this is a ridiculously long article. Okay, I'm not going to read all this, but calling someone a burnout is a cop-out. Okay. She says, I think I have some of the answers to specific questions that made me start writing this essay. Yours are probably somewhat or substantially different. I don't have a plan of action other than to be more honest with myself about what I am and I'm not doing and why, and to try to disentangle myself from the idea that everything good is bad and everything bad is good. This isn't a task to complete or a line on a to-do list or even a New Year's resolution. It's a way of thinking about life and what joy and meaning we can derive, not just from optimizing it, but living it, which is another way of saying it's life's actual work. Life is boring. I've been to revolutions. I've watched people be killed in revolutions. And what I find is that these big breaking news stories, the riots, the revolutions, civil conflict, they happen in tiny isolated areas. Maybe something else that's happening is that people expect their life to be a movie. They're so concerned about that, magical climax of finding a magic wand, of becoming the hero, of slaying the dragon, that they forget that life is mostly tedium. Mostly. You wake up, you do your routine, you pay your bills, you get your car fixed, you show up to work, you sit around all day, you go home. Repeat. Routine. It's rare that you have the magical moment. But I guess being raised on Instagram and Facebook and only seeing the highlights of everyone's life, the best snapshots, no one's posting on Facebook a picture of them mailing, their bills. So what happens is that people expect life to be magic. It's not. It's boring, but hey, that's fine. Just lower your expectations. Go smell the flowers, go for a walk, go to some water, skip some stones, play some video games, enjoy a nice drink, have some nice food. That's what life is all about. Most importantly, though, family. Because you will regret it, and I know this full well as somebody without a family, you will regret it when you're older and you have no one, and you're lonely. Family is probably the most important thing, and most polls show that. So anyway, millennials, grow up. Stop calling people names. Have a family, or not. Maybe it's not possible. I don't know. Life's complicated. Life's not easy. For the most part. Sometimes. I'll see you in a few minutes. More videos to come.